Chapter 61. Just destroy it. 3. Kale did not care that Witira and Paston were looking at him with uncertainty. They would soon find out about On and Hong's skills. Let's go. The black dragon started to fly up toward the top of the stone wall and Kale's body started to float while following behind it. Naturally, On and Hong were in Kale's arms as he headed up. Paston. Paston nodded his head at Witira's after she called out his name, and the whale siblings started to run up the stone wall at a quick pace. Water surrounded their feet and shot them up with every step. Sweesh. Kale cut through the wind and reached the top of the wall. Wow. Hong's voice was full of admiration. The forest of darkness and its vast natural setting appeared in front of the group. This was the second largest of the 5 forbidden regions, starting from the tip of the northeast part of the Roan Kingdom and creating an oval shape until the eastern shoreline. It was as large as 2 or 3 average-sized territories. That was why the Roan Kingdom wanted to take control of this land, but nobody was able to do so until now. The Black Dragon or Choi Han might be able to do it. It's big. Kale casually commented before verifying the stone mountain at the center of the forest. Unlike its name, the Forest of Darkness was not actually dark at all times. In fact, the forest, that was starting to light up from the rising sun, was actually beautiful to look at. Going down? Sure. The black dragon slowly lowered Kale and the kittens to the ground. The whale siblings were already down there waiting for them. Crunch. Kale lightly landed on the ground and stepped on some leaves underneath his feet. You said that the Forest of Darkness is divided into regions. Kale nodded at Witira's question and lowered On and Hong onto the ground. He then opened up his magic bag as he started to answer Witira's question. It is divided into the outer and inner regions. This large forest was divided into 2 stages. The first stage was the outer region, which was not that dangerous. There were only a few mutant monsters, and the majority were small monsters. On the other hand, the second stage, the inner region with the stone mountain at its center, was extremely dangerous. Even Choi Han needed tens of years to freely move around the second stage. Freely moving around meant that there was no danger. Choi Han became stronger than all of the monsters. Of course, such an issue was not a concern for Kale's group. The swamp we are heading to is at the border of the inner and outer regions. It should not be too dangerous. The outer region was large, but that was based on its width. It would not be very far if they walked in a straight line. The inner region was much larger, as it was in the shape of an oval. I plan on avoiding as many monsters as possible, but I don't see a reason to delay our travel by taking roundabout ways. The fact that Kale did not plan to go out of his way to avoid monsters made the whale siblings start to smile. As long as they were not going up against a dragon, there was nothing that the humpback whale beast people, the rulers of the ocean, had to fear. I am removing my magic. Once the black dragon said that, the whale siblings' appearances returned to normal. Witira started to smile with a refreshed expression. Ah. So refreshing. It was a bit stuffy under that magic. Thank you very much, Dragon Nym. Thank you very much, Dragon Nym. The black dragon flapped its wings at Witira and Paston's thanks before approaching Kale. The black dragon had an odd expression on its face. The mana is dark here. Dark. The black dragon nodded at Kale's question and looked around the forest. There is also a smell. What kind of smell? Something I am familiar with. But I cannot tell what it is. Familiar but can't tell. Kale looked toward the black dragon with a confused expression, but the black dragon quickly looked away. He then continued to speak. It is not a dangerous smell. Just a very old one. Do dragons have a really good sense of smell? Kale was curious, but was not able to remain curious for a long period of time. What do we do from here? How do we get to the swamp? Witira could see Kale taking a piece of paper out of the magic bag. She then saw him open it up. A map. It definitely was a map, but it was a pretty terrible one. However, it did have the stone mountain in the center with multiple other areas designated on it. Yes, it is a map. Kale had used the information he read in The Birth of a Hero to create a map. But it is not very accurate. We need to experience it ourselves to explore and understand the Forest of Darkness. Kale then looked at Witira and Paston, who were looking at him silently, and continued. So, take the lead. The black dragon was already flapping its wings and looking at the whale siblings from behind Kale. Witira smiled and reached her hand out to Kale, who took a water bottle out of the magic bag and handed it to her. Witira drank the water before reaching her hand back out. Swoosh! A 3-meter-long whip appeared in her hand. She flicked it once before wrapping it around her arm and then joked with the group. I will safely get you to your destination. Kale found her to be reliable. A humpback whale. The royal family of the ocean was said to be able to easily handle the killer whale beast people, the troublemakers of the sea. However, he did not plan to do as she said. But there was no need to tell her that right now. He then pointed to the entrance of the Forest of Darkness. Let's go. Kale stepped into the Forest of Darkness. The forest was not loud, but there were many different noises echoing inside. The sounds of insects, the roars of monsters in the distance, birds chirping, and even some other strange monster noises. Aren't dangerous places usually quiet? Paston cut through the bushes with his sword as he asked Kale. That is only when there is a single ruler in the area. The Forest of Darkness did not have a ruler. There was just a relationship of eat or get eaten. Be careful with your shoes. Make sure your skin does not get revealed. Got it. Paston looked down at the extra cloth between his pants and shoes and then looked back up at Kale. Kale's magic bag really was a magical bag. It had all sorts of items inside, and they were all necessary items for their travels. You need to be careful of your ankles here. The insects are dangerous too. You can get poisoned if you are bitten. Paston recalled what Kale had told them and wondered how Kale knew about all of this. However, he could not easily ask because Kale was still very busy. Look forward. Ah, yes sir. Kale's blunt voice made Paston quickly turn back forward and follow behind his sister Witira to clear their path. They were currently passing through short bushes that reached their waists. Kale was furiously recording new information onto his map. It might be useless. Kale wondered if there really was a reason for him to make a map of the Forest of Darkness. It wasn't like he was planning on conquering the Forest of Darkness. However, he had a gut feeling that there would be a way for him to sell this in the future. Kale's style was to do things right so that it could be used in the future to make money in the future if possible. We are almost through this bushy area. Next is the small monsters area. Witira nodded at Kale's statement and leisurely flicked her whip. Honestly speaking, this group was so strong Kale did not need to be nervous. Maybe that was why, but Witira was calm once they got past the bushy area and arrived at the small monsters area. Crack! A branch broke under her foot. At that moment. Let's proceed quietly. Kale commented while two sounds of something moving in the air suddenly appeared. Pot. Pot. Witira lightly waved her hand and there were some poisonous darts between her fingers. Kale could see Witira turning around and smiling at him. I will take care of them quietly. Some monsters started to reveal themselves from behind the trees. Witira looked toward them with a blank expression. Are they mutated goblins? Ki-ee-eek. Kirik, Kirik. They seemed to be larger than the average goblins and their faces looked a bit different as well. Furthermore, their skin was purple and red. No, they are not goblins. Witira turned toward the hand that was placed upon her shoulder. Kale stood next to Witira and looked out toward the monsters approaching them. Young master, it is dangerous in the front. They are Hanta, a type of monster from the eastern continent. Ah. The Forest of Darkness had monsters from the eastern continent. Kale had encountered the first of the bunch. They are similar to goblins, but dumber and have a tendency to be more cruel and violent. No wonder they seemed so foreign. Witira nodded her head and calmly answered. I will take care of them. No, I will do it. Excuse me. Witira was blankly staring at Kale until she saw An and Hong jump over Kale and land on the ground. The two of them brushed their bodies off and prepared for battle. Even we can do this much. Witira could see that over 10 of these small monsters were heading toward them. She then looked back at Kale and saw that his body was becoming surrounded by fog. At the same time, An started to slowly disappear. I have something to test. Kale needed to know approximately how strong he was. This was the perfect time to test it out. He had the black dragon to the right, Witira to the left, and Paston behind him. Wasn't this the perfect setting for him to run wild without worrying about being harmed? Step back. Young Master Kale. Save me if it looks dangerous. How can I get hurt when I have all of you here? Witira took a step back after seeing the completely confident gaze in Kale's eyes that seemed to show full trust in the three of them. She went and stood with Paston in the rear, ready to step in at any moment. At that moment, a shield was created around Witira and Paston. The black dragon moved in front of the whale siblings and started to speak. The poison is stronger than it looks. Poison. That made Paston look at his sister with confusion. Witira didn't have any idea as well, so she just shook her head and looked forward before letting out a gasp of admiration. Not bad. An, Hong, and Kale were all surrounded by fog. Furthermore, the color of the fog was weird. It was closer to red than the usual white. Poison. She seemed to understand the meaning of that word. Kirik, Kirik. Kiriiti-Irik. So loud. Kale created gusts of wind in one hand and both feet while being surrounded by the fog. Kale could feel the vitality of the heart starting to run wild in his chest and gave the order. Let's go. Kale's body instantly shot forward, and, at the same time, a thick fog surrounded the area. Kirik. Kirik, Kirik. Ki. The fog was so thick that you could not even see a few inches in front of your eyes. Two strands of red fog started to move inside that thick fog. Bang. A whirlwind shot up to the sky and cut off one of the monster's arms in the process. Gek, Kirik, Kek. The red fog swallowed up that monster. Kale then shot up from right next to the spot and called forth his shield. The shield that was almost twice the size as Kale was roaming around the red fog. Then suddenly, the shield dropped straight toward the ground. Boom. The sound of something being squashed came along with the loud noise. As soon as the shield landed, a whirlwind filled with red fog was created right next to it. Two monsters who were caught up in the whirlwind were vomiting blood as they got blasted into the air. Kek. Ugh, Kek. The monster's poisoned bodies started to bleed out of every orifice. Paston blankly watched that scene before blurting out. I thought you said he was weak. He is weak. Paston started to think after hearing the black dragon's confident answer. They may be small, but there are over 10 of them. And they are monsters that are stronger than goblins. He looked toward his sister, who casually answered while smiling brightly. Looks like it will end soon. Boom. Another loud noise was heard as the fog slowly started to dissipate. It had finished like she had said. Paston could now see Kale. They must be weak because we are still only near the entrance. Kale was speaking confidently while standing on top of his symbol, the silver shield. Underneath the shield were two monsters that were no longer recognizable. Mio. The fog disappeared and the silver kitten On reappeared. The poison seems to be weak. The red kitten Hong reappeared while shaking his tail. The ground where Hong had been was completely black. Hong used his back paws to cover up the black dirt with some other dirt. It was a peaceful scene, but Paston couldn't help but ask after seeing the corpse of a monster that died from poison, a monster that was still dying from poison, and the monsters that died from being crushed by Kale's shield or Kale's whirlwinds. Young Master Nim, you didn't get hurt, right? Nope. Paston urgently asked in shock. You're hurt. Kale pointed to the back of his hand. I got scratched. Paston immediately shut up. Witira patted her brother's shoulder before approaching Kale. Kale lifted his shield up and put it away. Since it was an ancient power, he didn't need to even wipe the blood off of it. It would be completely clean when he summoned it again. Young Master Kale, will you continue to take on the small monsters? Probably. Kale washed the blood off of his hand after recalling his shield and whirlwinds. I can't push myself too hard because I am still in recovery. Witira couldn't help but laugh at the confident Kale, as well as An and Hong, who were getting feedback from the black dragon about their battle. Kale then urged her, as well as the rest of them, on. Let's hurry. They still had a lot of ground to cover. 2 days later, Kale lowered the map in his hand and looked out in front of him as he spoke to the rest of the group. We are close now. The boundary between the inner and outer regions. It would not be much longer until they reached that point. Chapter 62, Just Destroy It, 4. We should get there in about an hour. Kale put the now accurate map back in his pocket before looking at his group. Drip, drip. Drops of blood were dripping from On's sharp claws. Gore, grrrrrrrr. A small monster that looked like a fox was twitching on the ground from being poisoned. The black dragon came over to report. All done. Close to 20 of these fox-like animals were dead. They really are getting stronger with experience. On and Hong could not learn properly because they had to live in hiding as they had run away from their tribe. The black dragon naturally lacked experience after living in confinement his entire life. Kale was using the Forest of Darkness's monsters to quickly fill those gaps in their training. Should I have fought as well? Where else would he get an opportunity to safely build experience? The black dragon and the kittens all abruptly turned their heads as Kale mumbled to himself. Seems like a useless idea. Weak human, it is too much for you at this point. 1 day is enough. Our youngest is right. You spit out blood from using the shield too much last time. Paston let out a gasp. Oh. However, Kale could see that Witira was just smiling brightly. He then saw her caress her whip with a determined gaze. That was the look of someone who wanted to fight. She really was a scary person. Kale quickly opened up his magic bag and gathered everyone around him. Everybody put this on before you go any farther. Is it because of poison? Yes. Kale answered Paston's question before putting the mask on the black dragon, who stuck his head toward him. Human. There is a weird scent. The black dragon frequently said this to Kale since a few days ago. What is it? I don't know. It is stronger here. It is something I am familiar with. It is probably poison or the rotting smell from the nearby plants. Kale brushed it off and approached On. The black dragon that was ignored tilted his head while wearing the mask. The black dragon started to mumble, but the mask prevented Kale from being able to hear what he was saying. No. It is not such a trivial scent. However, the black dragon remained quiet because it was not a dangerous scent. Kale then put the mask on On's face. Even Choi Han avoided this swamp. Choi Han had a pretty high resistance to poison. However, there was no reason to go through the swamp when there were many other paths in the Forest of Darkness while this path was messy and annoying. Paston approached Kale. It is really interesting that there are only 2 swamps in a forest this large. Really? I don't think so. Paston could see Kale starting to smirk from underneath the mask. It was a pretty sly smirk. You'll understand once you see it. 2 swamps were enough. Kale verified that everyone had their masks on and checked their expressions. They had only been sleeping between 1 to 3 hours a night ever since they entered the Forest of Darkness. You all look so healthy. Nobody looked tired. All of you really are amazing. Paston's face scrunched up at Kale's comment. He looked over to his sister and asked with his gaze. Should he really be saying that? Witira shrugged her shoulders and avoided answering the question. Paston turned back to look at Kale, who looked to be the healthiest of the group right now. Paston then looked toward the black dragon and the kittens. They rushed over to look after Kale whenever they thought Kale was tired. Of course, Kale was full of energy thanks to the vitality of the heart, but nobody else knew about that. Witira continued to caress the whip on her arm as she asked Kale. Young Master Kale, is it our turn now? Kale pointed with his foot instead of responding. Right there was the boundary between the outer and inner regions. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr noises poured out toward Kale as soon as he stepped past the boundary. He then proceeded to speak to Witaira, who took a step past the boundary as well. Go. A humanized humpback whale. This ruler of the sea was not the type to be careful. It's your turn. Flick. Witaira flicked her whip as soon as Kale finished speaking. Boom. A large crater was created on the ground from the flick of the whip. Grrrrrrr. Kee. Squeakeek. The noises disappeared. Witira, someone whose strength fell between Choi Han and the Black Dragon, was itching for a fight. Her heart had been beating wildly while looking at the better-than-expected skills of the group. "Shall we hurry on?" She smiled and asked Kale as this mysterious young master responded back with a completely relaxed smile. "Yes, as fast as possible. I want to go home and rest." Paston let out a sigh after hearing what Kale had to say, before taking out his whirlpool sword. The enemies slowly started to reveal themselves in the now quiet forest. The boundary between the outer and inner regions was a location for monsters that were weaker than the monsters in the inner region, but the monsters in front of them were still much stronger than the so-called weak monsters outside. Mutant ogres, mutant trolls, spider-like monsters from the eastern continent, and even high-level monsters appeared. The monsters here really are different. They still want to fight, even after seeing Dragon Nim. Paston stepped forward and peeked back and forth between the Black Dragon and Kale. Kale nodded his head and gave an order. "Hurry up and fight." "Yes, sir." Paston jumped forward and the battle between the strong monsters and the whale siblings began. The monsters in the Forest of Darkness did not get scared, even in front of strong creatures like a dragon or members of the whale tribe. In fact, it made them charge at them even harder. It was like they were fighting for their survival, thinking that they could not allow a strong person who could rule over them to appear within their Forest of Darkness. Kale leisurely watched for a bit until he saw a shield being cast, whereupon he asked the Black Dragon, "What about you? Too annoying to deal with those weaklings?" "Sure. Let's go." Kale started to slowly walk forward with the shield. Boom. An ogre's body was split into 2 even pieces. Some of the blood spurted onto the shield. Flick. Boom. The sound of the whip was followed by the explosion of a giant spider, and one of the legs flew over and hit the shield before falling to the ground. "Watch and learn." Kale walked through the battlefield in a straight line as he leisurely spoke, while Hong and the Black Dragon all pretended not to care but were seriously watching the battle. The monsters that appeared in front of Kale, who seemed to be on a stroll through the forest, all disappeared thanks to Witira. Kale stopped once he could see the swamp in the distance before starting to speak. "This is now the start of the swamp region." Boom. Boom. The mutant troll's head fell to the ground before it was followed by its body. Witira flicked off the fluids on the whip as she responded. "Let us keep moving." Sigh. Paston let out a sigh as he followed his sister to Kale's side. The whale siblings suddenly stopped walking and tightly pressed their masks. It was because poison and a rotting smell entered their nose. At the same time, their eyes opened wide after seeing the swamp that was covered by large trees until now. "What do you think? Isn't it fitting for the Forest of Darkness?" Kale turned away from the shocked Paston and looked toward the swamp. The swamp was as wide as a lake and pitch black. He spoke to the rest. "It is a pretty large lake. It is large enough for multiple huge ships to fit. It is also unique compared to other swamps because this swamp is black." It was the most fitting spot to explain the reason for the name of the Forest of Darkness. This swamp was the only actual black spot in the forest. "I didn't expect it to be so big." Witira let out her admiration. She then took a gulp after looking at the swamp area. Kale understood why she would have such a reaction. All of the plants were either black or brown, yet they were not dying, and instead they were extremely vibrant. "It must be poison." Kale nodded in response and tightened the mask on his face. He also tightened the laces on his shoes and put on some gloves. The rest of the party followed suit. They could hear Kale's voice coming through the mask. "The plants here have grown up within the poison and have mutated to survive in the environment. Although it might not be a deadly poison, they all have some type of poison within them. Be careful and make sure the plants do not touch your skin." That made Paston think about the mermaid's poison and quickly make sure he was completely covered. He then felt that something was odd. Hong. The red kitten strolled past him. Hong looked toward Kale and dashed into the swamp region after seeing Kale nod. Witira tried to reach out and grab him, but it was too late. Hong. Hong did not have a mask nor anything on him. Witira looked toward Kale with shock, but Kale did not seem to be fazed. Witira then heard Hong's voice. "Delicious." Hong was wagging his tail and chewing on a black plant. Kale stepped into the swamp region as well and approached Hong. "How is it? It's just a paralyzing poison, but it is tangy. Kale sternly commented to the excited Hong. Slow down, you might choke. Eat slowly, but eat a lot. Okay. I feel like I am getting stronger. Kale snarkily commented to the whale siblings, who were still blankly standing outside the swamp region. Are you not coming? The whale siblings slowly entered the swamp with chaotic expressions on their faces. Kale slowly led them closer to the swamp. Thankfully, the brown ground and black swamp were easy to differentiate from each other, so there was basically no danger of falling into the swamp lake. That was why Kale was able to quickly inspect his surroundings. Paston. Yes. Paston was standing there with a stiff expression on his face, acting as if that blank expression from earlier had never existed. Kale pointed to a location nearby. Looks like someone was here recently, doesn't it? There were some marks on the ground and lots of footprints. Since the monsters did not come to this area, there was only one explanation. I will investigate it. Paston immediately went to investigate and Kale turned away from him. The ingredient from the swamp that made the mermaids stronger. The evidence they left behind gave Kale a good idea of what it might be. Looks like there is a good chance it was the swamp itself. There were many marks on the ground next to the swamp. They probably didn't care about hiding their tracks, since they believed that nobody would come here. Tap tap. Kale stopped looking at the swamp and looked down after feeling a tap on his leg. Hong seemed to be really excited, as his mouth was covered in black and he was rubbing on Kale like he was trying to be cute. I want to try drinking the swamp too. Witira, who was next to them, flinched, but Kale did not care as he responded to Hong. Wait for now. Hong's ears fell. But I want to get even stronger. Why? Hong peeked toward the black dragon and his sister, An. A large hand patted Hong's head at that moment. Don't think about useless things and take it slow. You're already stronger than I am. But everyone is stronger than you are. Kale lightly patted Hong's head and told Hong to go over there and eat some other poisons. Kale thought about how he would make An and Hong stronger in the future before turning away. However, that made him immediately start to frown. What's wrong with him? The black dragon seemed to be acting odd, as he continuously tilted his head to the left and right. At that moment, Paston approached. There are no signs of digging up any of the nearby plants recently. However, there are many signs that they are doing something to the swamp itself. Based on the marks, I would say they were here between 2 weeks to a month ago. Kale looked toward the wide swamp and responded. It looks like they gathered up some of the swamp. That does seem to be the case. Kale was about to speak after seeing Paston and Witira looking serious. However, the black dragon approached at that time and Kale started to frown. Why did you take the mask off? It was not a familiar scent, but a familiar scent of mana. What? Kale started to get the chills. The black dragon pointed to the swamp with his short front paw. There is a familiar scent of mana here. Kale started to frown even more. The black dragon confidently added on. There is the scent of dragon mana in the swamp. Kale urgently looked toward the black swamp. This extremely vast swamp was massive, but Kale was thinking about the size of an adult or ancient dragon. Of course, there is no sign of life in the mana. It is just a very weak trace. These words were the final blow. The unbelievable thought in Kale's head quickly became the reality. He then also felt like he knew how the mermaids got stronger. There was a dragon corpse inside the swamp. Chapter 63, Just Destroy It, 5. Kale immediately asked the black dragon. How can you feel the scent of dead mana? Mana. That symbolized a power that existed in nature. In some senses, it was similar to an ancient power that was created in a specific location. However, the two were very different. The difference was between whether or not it could be left behind. Mana disappeared as soon as the person who controlled that mana died, while ancient powers could be left behind. The black dragon easily answered. I think it is because of the swamp. The swamp is dominating the mana and preventing it from dissipating. Dominating. Kale's expression turned odd, but the black dragon kept silent. The whale siblings, as well as An and Hong, approached Kale and the black dragon. The black dragon started to speak into Kale's mind. I am very perceptive. Kale made eye contact with the black dragon. I feel a power similar to your shield and wind inside the swamp. Ha! Kale inadvertently let out a gasp-like laughter. The maskless black dragon started to smile. Kale also started to lightly smile as well. Ancient power. There was an ancient power inside the swamp, and it had a good chance of being related to the keyword, dominate. This is a first. This was Kale's first time finding an ancient power that was not discussed in the novel. Of course, he had no idea whether this was an ancient power left behind by someone or one that was naturally developed in this location. You are very smart. Correct. I am smart. The rest of the group became even more curious after seeing the black dragon and Kale smirking mischievously. Young Master Kale, can you tell me what is going on? What do you mean by the scent of a dragon's mana? Kale turned around to look at Witira. She was asking Kale, but seemed to have at least a decent idea of what was going on. I'm sure you already have an idea, but there is a good chance that there is a dragon corpse inside the swamp. A corpse? Yes. But it is most likely very old and probably mummified. Kale only knew about the Forest of Darkness based on Choi Han's experience as described in the novel. However, there was a number of very important information told by the novel. No ruler. It was probably correct to say that there were no dragons in the Forest of Darkness while Choi Han was there. Furthermore, people in the novel never mentioned a dragon's lair or a dragon in the Forest of Darkness. It must mean that it is a very old corpse. Tap. Tap. Kale lowered his head to see Hong point to the swamp with a bitter expression. I guess I can't eat the swamp water. Hong seemed to have lost his appetite after hearing dragon corpse. Kale could see that Hong was heading over to the black dragon to apologize without waiting to hear his answer. Sorry. I thought it would be delicious. I do not care. The black dragon responded back with a curious expression. The thing inside the swamp and I are different. We are not related. Dragons really didn't seem to care about their tribe. They all just considered themselves to be individuals unique from anything and everything else in the world. Kale looked at the completely unperturbed black dragon before he started to speak. I thought that the mermaids would have gotten stronger from the poison in the swamp. Their specialties are poison after all. The whale siblings Paston and Witira looked toward him. However, now I am thinking that it is probably the dead mana in the swamp and not the poison increasing their power. Either that, or it is from both the poison and the dead mana. Kale looked at the siblings. If it is poison, they would just need to take a sample to find an antidote. However, this is a whole different ball game if it is from the dragon's dead mana. Kale could see Witira frowning while Paston was looking at the black swamp and the nearby area. A depressed comment came out of his mouth. It's too wide. Witira spoke up as well. I am not sure about what we should do. They were able to narrow down the cause of the mermaid's source of strength, but they could not figure out a way to deal with it. It would be one thing if it was poison, but the other issue was too complicated to solve quickly. It's not like we could prevent anyone from coming into the Forest of Darkness or stay here protecting this black swamp at all times. Witira looked out toward the swamp once more. A dragon's corpse. That was an unexpected problem. The fact that this swamp was large enough to completely submerge an adult dragon made things even more difficult. A normal dragon grows in size a total of 3 times. An adult dragon that completed all 3 stages of growth was humongous. They were at least 5 meters larger than a humpback whale like herself. At that moment, he could hear Kale's voice once again. It's simple. His voice was peaceful. Witira turned her head. Kale had walked up to the edge of the swamp while smiling. First, take as much of the swamp water as you need. Kale turned away from the swamp and looked toward Witira. And then we make another deal. Deal. Kale's smile became bigger after watching the confusion spread on Witira's face. I didn't plan on doing this, but... Originally, he was just going to figure out what caused the mermaids to get stronger before getting out of here. However, the situation was different now. A pool of dead mana is dangerous. The mermaids were probably able to absorb the dead mana because they were dark creatures. However, it was just a dangerous poison to natural creatures like the whales or humans. There was no reason to keep something around that was helpful to the enemy while dangerous to himself. There was also a new benefit in front of his eyes. Even if it was a mummified corpse, the dragon's bones were still present. 1. Furthermore, there was also the ancient power. Yes. We will make another deal. What does that have to do with dealing with this situation? Witira subconsciously caressed her whip again. An unexpected sense of anticipation filled her heart, and Kale fulfilled that anticipation completely. I will take care of it for you. Witira could see the excitement in Kale's eyes. She had never seen such a look in Kale's eyes before. Kale pointed to the swamp and gave a short answer. I'll just destroy it. What? Witira looked at the black swamp. The very large black swamp. What did he say he was going to do to this? She was staring blankly at the swamp when Kale started to speak again. No need to overthink it. She looked back at Kale. He still had a smile on his face and seemed to be very excited. I will get rid of it for you, so make a deal with me. Kale was thinking about what he was about to do. This was the Forest of Darkness, somewhere where nothing would seem weird. It was a place where he could claim anything that happened to be an accident and feign ignorance. Young Master Kale. It was a deal that Witira could not reject. Let's make a deal. Kale and Witira decided to make a second deal. But there isn't anything I need right now. Please let me know whenever a condition you like shows up. I will accept it as long as it is something reasonable for both parties. This is a promise Witira makes with my name on the line, so you do not need to worry. Kale casually nodded his head at her words. It was fine if she did not do anything for him. The dragon's bones and ancient powers were enough of a reason to give it a try. By the way, anything coming out of the swamp belongs to me. Sure. Witira was disappointed about the dragon's bones, but decided not to be greedy. The whale tribe was able to rule because they were strong on both land and sea. However, water was also their weakness. Underwater, inside of the swamp. If the swamp water and mud was poisonous, it would be a difficult environment for the whales to survive. Kale decided to proceed right away after hearing Witira's response. He stood at the border of the swamp and waved toward the rest of the group. Step back. The rest of the group became confused. However, Kale just sternly said it once more for these chumps that won't listen to him when he wanted to get to work right away. Go back into the forest and stay there. Don't come out until I tell you to come out. Kale opened up the magic bag and continued to speak. You could get poisoned or hurt if you don't listen. Paston, who had been listening quietly, started to speak. Young Master Nim, will you do it on your own? He is not alone. The black dragon responded for Kale. Paston turned toward the sound of the voice and then flinched. He could see the clear vibrations of mana around the black dragon. They were like waves floating around the black dragon, who had found the perfect opportunity to show off his strength. The two of us will take care of it, so go wait over there. Young Master Kale, I really can't tell what your limits are. Kale just let Witira's comment go in one ear and out the other ear, as he patted On and Hong on the head. Hong's ears and tails were down. You two stay there as well. On, take good care of Hong. Hong, I'll bring you some of the swamp poison, so just wait for me. Hong nodded his head at Kale before approaching the black dragon. Be careful. Don't get hurt. I understand. The black dragon nodded his head at Hong and stood still while Hong patted him with his front paws. Kale thought that the kids were playing well with each other and took an empty bottle out of the magic bag and threw it toward Paston. Put the swamp water into the bottle. It is a magic bottle, so it won't break. How did you even prepare for this? Paston looked toward Kale with admiration, but Kale did not care. Instead, he continued to ruffle through the magic bag that looked small on the outside but was very spacious on the inside. Young Master Nim, I filled the bottle. Then go wait over there. Kale told Paston, who had filled the large bottle with mud and water from the swamp, and the rest of the group to move along. Witira hesitated for a moment, but moved back toward the forest at the kitten's urgings. The black dragon verified that everyone was safely far away before approaching Kale. What do you plan to dash dot? The black dragon stopped talking after seeing what Kale took out of the magic bag. He then continued speaking after seeing Kale gently smiling at him. Human, you look a bit smart right now. Nah. There were 2 magic bombs in Kale's hands. These were different from the bombs with the multiple explosions he used in the Abar coast. These were the stronger and more destructive bombs used in the novel when the Abar mages launched their final attack. 2 of those bombs were in Kale's hands right now. I was debating where to use these, but I guess an opportunity has shown up. Kale handed the 2 magic bombs to the Black Dragon. Run wild. Can I really do that? Kale shortly answered the Black Dragon, who had caused a very visible fluctuation of mana to show how much he wanted to use his full strength. Don't ask something so obvious. Naturally, make sure I don't get hurt. The Black Dragon started to smile. Swai-theish. A gust of wind started to run amok with the Black Dragon at the center. Natural power. The mana was triggering the air in the vicinity. Kale quickly summoned the indestructible shield after feeling like he was going to be pushed back. At the same time, he could see layers of shields being created around him. 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers. It was a total of 3 layers. I need at least this much to make sure you don't get hurt. The confidently speaking Black Dragon's eyes were sparkling. Dragons really had completely different personalities compared to whales. Rather than loving peace, dragons preferred to rule with fear and destruction. They were selfish and violent beings. Kale pointed toward the Black Swamp once the Black Dragon had finished preparations for the bombs and looked toward him. Destroy it. Chapter 64, wasn't supposed to be like this. 1. The mana in the Black Swamp and the air around them was fluctuating. The Black Dragon was in the sky looking down. He was a dragon in the end. A violent and ominous aura was dominating the swamp region. Kale turned around to look at the boundary of the Black Swamp and the forest region. Since that violent and ominous aura was controlling the boundary, the forest was not shaking. However, the group waiting for them there all had pale expression. Kale recalled the information about an average dragon's strength in The Birth of a Hero. Boom. 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 Kale turned his gaze back up to the sky. Multiple strands of mana were crashing against each other as they gathered around the Black Dragon. The Black Dragon looked down at the swamp calmly. A 4-year-old dragon that used to get tortured. That same dragon could no longer be found. Kale started to feel chills down his back. Oh. PSSSSSSSSSH. Cav dash. Squeak dash. The forest of darkness started to cry. Kale looked around and did not see any other existences. However, there were many different sounds of screaming coming from the forest. The monsters that had not feared the Black Dragon earlier were also scared that they were screeching at the top of their lungs. So loud. Kale looked toward the Black Dragon after hearing it speak in his mind. The Black Dragon was looking down at Kale as well. The 2 magic bombs were already floating in the air. There was just emptiness in the Black Dragon's eyes. All of this was just trivial to him. Ha! The corners of Kale's lips slowly went farther and farther up. The whale tribe's Witaira. An overwhelming dominance that was worlds apart from the large humpback whale was coming from the Black Dragon's tiny body right now. Kale answered in a loud voice. Do it fast, because it's loud for me too. I knew you would say that. The Black Dragon finally started to smile as his unique black mana started to surround him. Boom. Now the ground was fluctuating. Kale could feel the vibrations underneath his feet. Amazing. However, he didn't have time to keep looking at the vibrating ground. The black mana had disappeared. In its place was a large bright orb above the Black Swamp. Crackle, crackle. The orb was like the sun, gathering all different sources of light as they crashed against each other like serpents. Kale gulped. It was at that moment. Swai-ish. The wind started to roar as the Black Dragon's black mana entered the 2 magic bombs. Click. Click. The 2 bombs started their countdowns. 2 bombs that were made to be as explosive as possible, along with an orb that looked like a giant meteor. Rather than destroying it, it is going to obliterate it. Kale wondered whether the dragon corpse would be okay, but could not actually ask about it. I'm doing it now. Kale could not see anything else after the Black Dragon said that. Bang. Kale covered his ears as the forest of darkness echoed. Ugh. Kale stumbled from the ground's vibrations, but did not close his eyes. The world turned black. A black fluid shot up into the sky as an extremely bright light shined in Kale's eyes. Screech! A chilling noise rang in Kale's ear. The light started to crack as it made contact with the black fluid. Kale raised his head. A black pillar shot up into the sky, making it look like night and day coexisted together. However, all of that quickly disappeared. The black pillar turned into dust and blew away with the wind. Crackle. The final shield broke down. The other two had already broken down earlier without any noise. Kale was not hurt. The black swamp had disappeared, but everything else remained normal. Kale turned his head to see that Paston had fallen on his butt with the kittens in his arms. He could also see Watira getting back up while holding onto a tree trunk. There was deep fear in both of their eyes. But the forest was not harmed. Only the swamp had disappeared. It was an amazing degree of control. That was why the whale tribes could not get rid of the fear in their eyes. Kale turned back around to see that the black pillar had disappeared, and the black dragon was standing alone. The black dragon was already looking at Kale as well. Kale spoke to the tiny dragon. Good work. All 5 of the dragon's senses were very alert right now. He could see that Kale, who was smiling at him, had goosebumps on his arm. He could also see Kale's gaze as well. You did really well. Kale's calm gaze made the black dragon start to smile. He then honestly shared his feelings. So refreshing. That made Kale go stoic. Seeing the dragon really looking refreshed made Kale make up his mind to never make this dragon angry. Ron, Choi Han, and Beacrox were also concerning. There were too many strong beings surrounding him for him to be happy that he was able to defeat a couple of small monsters. Kale reaffirmed his desire to live a peaceful life after feeling the existence that is a dragon. He then looked at the bottom of the swamp that was now visible. The black swamp was gone, but there was still a bit of black liquid remaining. It is in the shape of a dragon. There was a block of black mud, looking like a clay dragon, remaining in the size of an adult dragon. He also found a white crown by where it seemed like the dragon's head would have been. It was the ancient power. Can I do as I please? The black dragon responded to him. Don't ask such obvious questions. Thanks. Kale did not notice the black dragon flinching as he headed toward the dragon-shaped black mud. He would probably find the dragon's bones if he got rid of this mud. If I get this and the magic power. What a jackpot. Kale started to smile and his palm started to itch with excitement. Pot. The shield appeared in front of Kale and a whirlwind started to roar in each of his hands. The whirlwinds were as large as possible and wind started to form underneath Kale's feet as well. Swoosh. It was the moment the sound of the wind gathered together. Speart. The black mud shot quickly toward Kale as if it wanted to swallow him. It was at that moment that Kale heard the voice of the ancient power's owner. This was also not a location-based ancient power, but one left behind by someone. Do you know what it means to dominate? Boom. 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 The cold voice that seemed to pierce through his skin made Kale's heart run wild. And then Kale's body suddenly shot forward. Bang. Bang. The whirlwinds in his hands shot out like arrows. The whirlwinds cut through the black mud to create a path. Kale quickly walked through that path. The shield and the wings prevented the black mud from landing on Kale. Dominating is to take away everything, even the enemy's breath. Boom. Boom. His heart beat madly every time he heard the voice. It was like he was fearful of the voice. Ugh. Kale bit down on his lips because of his heart's wild beating. Swoosh. The whirlwind arrows cut through the black mud again. Kale continued to hear the owner of the ancient power's dominating voice in his mind. Do you know what the easiest way to take away your enemy's breath is? Sweesh, sweesh. Whirlwinds continued to pour out of Kale's hands to clear the way for him. Kale was surrounded by the black mud, making him become covered in darkness. However, Kale had to continue to walk down the path created by the whirlwinds. He then heard the voice again. Fear is the answer. Kale started to smile. Fear? Kale, no, Kim Rock-soo, had overcome all sorts of fears. He needed to do so because he wanted to live. He wanted to live a happier and more peaceful life than anyone else. Humans already lived a life full of dread and fear about the mysterious future. A combined whirlwind that was bigger than any of the other whirlwinds previously shot out of Kale's hand to continue to create a path. Roar. It was much stronger than before. Bullshit. Domination. Fear. Kale didn't care about that. All he cared about was how it would benefit him. Kale quickly walked through the path he created. He then heard the voice again. Muhahaha. You are right. It is bullshit. You already know. Found it. Kale could see the white dragon's skull, as well as the white crown on its head. Kale reached out toward the crown and his fingertips touched the tip of jewel on the crown. Use it well. A bright light shot out of the crown and made the black mud disappear. At the same time, the crown flew toward Kale. He closed his eyes only to hear a different and refreshing voice. Sometimes, even bluffing can save your life. Mwahaha. Kale could feel another power wrapping around his heart. Boom, boom. His heart was beating wildly. He could immediately tell what this power was. Kale's expression turned iffy. What the hell is this? Kale opened his eyes. He saw that all of the black mud had disappeared and that the large dragon's corpse had revealed itself. Human, why do you seem as strong as the tip of my claw? No, you are still weak, so what is going on? The black dragon rushed over to Kale. He seemed to be quite confused. Kale started to smile. My charisma has increased. What useless crap are you saying now, human? The black dragon looked anxious, but it was the truth. Kale was able to learn the name of this ancient power. Dominating Aura. It was a really cheesy name, but that was exactly what it was. Only, your aura becomes stronger. It was a pretty useless power compared to the decorated crown shape it came in. It is a perfect power for scamming. Scamming is bad. Kale ignored the black dragon that had started to frown and nag at him, and looked toward the rest of their group. He could see that they were hesitating and could not approach him. Kale put away the dominating aura and motioned to the group standing far away. Currently, the entire forest was quiet, as if they had never screeched in the first place. Kale was the one to break that silence. Come over here. The deep voice made the kittens, who were covering their ears and face, abruptly turn their heads. They were then able to approach Kale and the black dragon very quickly. However, they rushed past Kale. They were heading to the black dragon. However, they slowed down once they got near the dragon. He doesn't look hurt. We were so scared. Our youngest cannot get hurt. The kittens roamed around the dragon and made sure he wasn't hurt. They then approached him and patted the dragon's back. Our youngest is the best. So cool. You are so strong. Kale made sure that the dragon calmly stayed with the kittens before looking toward the whale siblings, who still had not moved. Kale had a smile on his face as he patted the dragon who approached him and asked the whale siblings. You can't come. The deep voice echoed in the whale siblings' ears. Witira opened up the fists she had been clenching. It wasn't like that right now, but the moment the black mud disappeared, Kale looked very different. He definitely was still a weak human who would die with a single flick of her whip. It was different from a strong power. It was only for a moment, but Kale reminded her of her father, the Whale King. It was not based on his strength. But it was an atmosphere that only those in power could have. That was what she felt. Young Master Kale. Kale asked the whale siblings who finally approached him. I'm guessing the two of you aren't hurt. We are not. Witira did not say anything after seeing that Kale was back to his usual self. Kale looked away from the whale siblings and back to the black dragon. Any stagnant mana left? Not anymore. Since the black liquids and mud disappeared, the stagnant mana no longer remained. All that was left was the sturdy dragon bones that had a high magic resistance and magic capabilities. Then you can store these bones. All right. Kale looked down toward the kittens, who were rubbing their faces on his calf. Once they made eye contact with Kale, both kittens started to tap Kale's feet with their paws. We thought something bad would happen. Why do you always step forward when you are the weakest? You just have to leave it to our youngest sibling. But he can't get hurt either. Kale ignored the kittens who were scolding him. He then continued to speak to the group. Let's go back. They had to return to the Hennetus estate now. And a few days later, Kale was able to return home 2 days later than expected. Hans had a message for him as soon as he returned. Young Master Nim. His Highness, the Crown Prince, contacted you. What is going on? Nothing. Kale vaguely answered Hans. However, he couldn't hide the smirk on his face. Something that is mutually beneficial. It was a great chance to steal the biggest treasure created by the Whipper Kingdom's civil war. Hans also delivered another piece of information to Kale. And Choi Han sent a message that he will be heading back from the Breck Kingdom. What? Little Locke is coming back with him as well. Oh, and even Miss Rosalind. What? This soon? Did they just destroy the Breck Kingdom? Kale started to frown as soon as he returned home. Chapter 65, wasn't supposed to be like this, too. But young Master Nim, what about your guards? I heard that the vice-captain and the children will remain in Harris Village to work. Kale started to frown at Hans's endless barrage of questions. Hans did not care, as he continued on while picking on and hung up into his arms. You said the vice-captain was staying back to investigate the Forest of Darkness. The explosion in the Forest of Darkness. The vice-captain knew of the cause of the explosion because Kale explained it to him, but the official story was that he was staying back to investigate because they were keeping Kale's involvement a secret. Young Master Nim, I will take care of these tiny roles for now, but I will not remain in this spot forever. Kale quickly got rid of Hillsman's comment to him from his mind. It was useless chatter anyways. I didn't need them anymore, so I let them go at the entrance. The Whale siblings had left at the entrance. They naturally had the bottle of swamp water with them. However, half of its contents were with Kale. Hong's tail was shaking because he was going to get stronger soon. On as well. Hans. Yes, sir. Did the Crown Prince say when I should contact him? Kale leisurely asked. However, Hans answered back sternly. Immediately. That was what he said. Kale started to smile. The Crown Prince must have been really anxious. Kale calmly started to speak. Then let's go. Kale sat down on the couch and crossed his legs. The territory's video communication mage peeked toward Kale. Is it ready? Yes. The mage gulped before continuing on. It is possible to speak with His Highness right now. The mage was looking at Kale, the person the Crown Prince was currently looking for. Compared to how nervous he was, Kale seemed to be very calm. Then you can head out now. The mage quickly bowed and left, although he turned around a few times on his way out due to curiosity. Kale commenced the video communication as soon as the mage left, and a face soon appeared on top of the half-transparent orb. Kale immediately started to speak. It is my great honor to speak with the star of the nation, the Wonderf Dash. Enough. The Crown Prince immediately cut him off, as if Kale's words gave him the chills. Kale had a sly smirk as he quickly stopped talking. Alberu calmly observed Kale, who was sitting down leisurely, yet in a way that was still respectful, and then got straight to the point. What a mess they made in the Breck Kingdom. Kale's smile became wider. It was what he had been waiting for. Why else would he have hurried over like this? It's not like he enjoying seeing the Crown Prince's face. The Crown Prince's information network is the most accurate. Kale quietly sat there and smiled as if nothing was wrong. Things would all take care of themselves. Seeing as how you are not saying anything, I guess you're already aware of what happened. See. All resolved without having to say anything. Princess Rosalind seems to have made her resolve. How else could she obliterate a Grand Duke's entire family in a single day? Kale felt his heart jump at the word, obliterate, but he did not let it show on his face. It was because he could see that Alberu was observing him. Right now, Alberu was poking at Kale to see what he could find out. She also gave up her claim to the throne. Rosalind really did give up her claim to the throne. Now it was time for her to show her true nature as a mage. But based on what I heard, there were two very strong individuals with her. Everybody else might not know, but I do. The Crown Prince really was good at explaining things. Alberu's sharp gaze pointed toward Kale. Aren't they your subordinates? Choi Han and Locke. Kale answered back with the truth to Alberu's question. My subordinates. They were not Kale's subordinates. Choi Han had nothing to do with him and Locke was just someone he was making a deal with. Kale could see the corner of the Crown Prince's lips slowly starting to move up. He also leaned back on the couch like Kale and casually spit it out. You sly fox. Cae could not disagree with that. Alberu saw Kale's lack of reaction and shook his head before adding on. Why do you want the magic tower? The Crown Prince no longer tried to beat around the bush or be glib around Kale. Kale looked toward the Crown Prince with a serious expression. Your Highness. Kale sat up from his seat, which made the Crown Prince also sit up with curiosity. Kale then continued. Every so often, I have this thought that you and I are very similar. The Crown Prince started to frown. Such a terrible thought. I agree. Kale just pushed aside the fact that the Crown Prince showed such disdain for the fact that the two of them may be similar and continued on. The Roan Kingdom is a kingdom without anything. Silence suddenly filled the room. If the mage outside the room heard what Kale just said, he may have fainted. However, the Crown Prince Alberu was smiling as Kale had expected. The Crown Prince seemed to have latched onto the bait. Not going to watch what you say now. Your Highness, you are currently smiling, aren't you? Well, it is the truth. The Crown Prince did not disagree. The Roan Kingdom was a kingdom where neither the knights nor the mages were very strong. Although it had a long history, it was just average in every aspect. However, Crown Prince Alberu knew that, although this would be fine during times of peace, it was not okay to be mediocre in every aspect during times of chaos. He knew that they needed at least one specialty area. However, that was not something that could easily be created in a short period of time. Such a large-scale issue would take tens of years if they were lucky, but at least an average of hundreds of years if they were not. That was why he had made up his mind. Take it from someone else. Take another kingdom's specialty away and make it theirs. And a good prey appeared in front of his eyes. The Whipper Kingdom that used to be the kingdom of mages. Kale and Alberu made eye contact as Alberu commented. You sharp bastard. The two of them had similar smirks on their faces. This time, it was Kale's turn to speak. The magic tower for me. And for you, your Highness dash. Kale and Alberu answered at the same time. Mages. Mages. A short silence filled the room before Alberu covered his eyes with his hand and started to laugh. Ha ha. Interesting. At first, I thought it was terrible that there was someone else like me. The Crown Prince laughed for a while before removing his hand and answering. I will give you whatever you need. Alberu then waited for Kale's response. Thank you very much. Just that sentence and nothing else. However, that sentence struck Alberu properly. Alberu was curious about this confident attitude of Kale's and asked. But why is it that you want the magic tower? Kale noticed that the Crown Prince seemed to be observing him again. He really was a difficult person to handle, but there was no reason to be so worried. I'm sure he wants to know if I know about the North. There was an existence that was a source of concern for the Roan Kingdom in the novel, The Northern Kingdom of Knights. Crown Prince Alberu was wary of that kingdom while preparing for their invasion. War is a time of chaos, and chaos will provide opportunities for the prepared. One of those opportunities was the mages running away from the Whipper Kingdom. The Crown Prince, who didn't have much influence in the kingdom, would use them to strengthen his power and increase his influence inside the kingdom. If Kim Roxu had read past the 5th volume of The Birth of a Hero, he would probably know the two powers that develop as new heroes. One would be a knight from the north. And the other would probably be the Crown Prince in front of him right now. Especially because the Black Dragon told him that the Crown Prince was not human. Kale started to smile. The Crown Prince was trying to figure out whether Kale knew about the North's movement and wanted the magic tower for that reason. I just want to own a magic tower. I shouldn't have asked. Alberu could see the sly smirk on Kale's face as he shook his head. Then why is it that your Highness needs the mages? Alberu started to smirk in a similar manner. I just want to give them a home. Both answers were terrible excuses, but neither of them called each other out. The two people who were both sitting back casually like they were part of a painting just continued to chat with each other. When do you plan to head out? I plan to go in about a month. 1 month later. Kale would be finished with his preparations and head to the Whipper Kingdom at that moment. The Civil War would be close to ending by the time he arrived at the Whipper Kingdom. Tunka's stupid face seemed to be shining gold in Kale's mind. How will you get there? By ship. And your guards? Guards. That word made Kale start to smile, and Alberu realized his mistake. I guess that was a useless question. Kale, make sure you are careful since your body is still weak. You know what to do, right? I will bring back any and all good things. Sometimes we really are on the same page for no reason. Kale and Alberu, although the two of them were very different people, the smirks on their faces looked so similar right now. 3 weeks later. Kale slowly opened his eyes and started to roll around. He rolled around his large bed and started to yawn. It was 3 p.m. He had just gotten up. He started to rub his eyes and looked up at the ceiling. I win. He woke up 1 hour later today. Our youngest wins again. I really don't know why he keeps waking up later and later. The Black Dragon and Hong looked back and forth between Kale and the clock while chatting with each other. Kale rubbed his belly with his right hand. He had only gotten up because he was hungry. Ah, the life of a rich person who doesn't have to work. This was the definition of happiness. Kale had not done anything for the past 3 weeks. He had come up with a name for the dragon, but asked for another month to think about it, and ordered other people to take care of all of the things he needed to prepare for the trip. He slept early and woke up late every day, just fooling and rolling around doing nothing inside the house. It was great that his family kept telling him to rest to recover. So he listened to them and did absolutely nothing. But Kale's happiness finally shattered. Human, it looks like Choi Han is back. The Black Dragon whispered in Kale's ear as he smiled. This is great. I have been so bored lately. Kale sat up on the bed with a stoic expression. Choi Han's group was supposed to arrive today. Since it was 3 p.m., they were probably already here and waiting for him. Kale stretched before getting up from the bed. These past 3 weeks of doing nothing resolved his mind even more. Make money so I can do nothing forever. Kale's eyes looked very determined. He decided that he would take care of the Whipper Kingdom and the Queen of the Jungle at once so that he could sit around doing nothing again. Kale headed into the bathroom while the Black Dragon approached Hong once he saw the door close. The weak human's eyes only seem full of spirit whenever he is going somewhere. You're right. But I'm glad that I am stronger now. I can make sure he does not get hurt. The silver kitten on who had been listening to the Black Dragon's conversation with Hong had an odd expression on her face. She thought about the smile on Kale's face as he rolled around the bed and mumbled to herself. Are you sure it is full of spirit? Yes. I am right. Nuna, it definitely is. I guess so. An finally agreed and brushed her fur. An and Hong's furs were much brighter now. The three of them sat around waiting for Kale to come out. They were looking forward to heading out of the house again after such a long time. Chapter 66, wasn't supposed to be like this, 3. However, contrary to their expectations, Kale headed into the study with a stoic expression. He pushed back his still slightly damp red hair as he sat down and faced the 3 guests. He took a sip of the tea that Deputy Butler Hans had given him before he started to speak. Long time no see. Kale looked toward Choi Han, whose expression did not change at all, and the just as shy Locke, and greeted them before looking toward Rosalind. Your Highness, Princess Rosalind, it has been quite a long time. Rosalind started to smile and answered in a refreshing manner. You cannot call me princess anymore. I have been banished from the royal family. Is that so? Yes. I have been removed from the family records. I no longer have a family name. Kale just turned away from Rosalind, who answered in such a happy manner. He then casually added on. I guess I can just continue to call you Miss Rosalind then. Rosalind's red pupils focused on Kale. Although she was the one who chose to give up her claims to the throne instead of getting written off, people still had looks of pity toward her these days. Seeing Kale acting so normally around her made her able to respond with a relaxed heart. Yes. Just like before. You can keep treating me like that in the future too. She could see Kale nodding without even looking at her and thought that she really did the right thing by choosing to come back with Choi Han. Kale did not see Rosalind smile, as he had turned to look at Choi Han and Locke. Choi Han was sitting straight up, but seemed to be quite happy. It feels like he became even more of a good guy. Choi Han's pupils were so clear that he seemed like a very good person. In fact, he seemed to have taken another step toward becoming a hero of justice. Kale turned away from that good guy vibe that did not mesh well with him and instead looked toward Locke. Locke was different from Choi Han. He seemed to have something to say, but was too shy to say it and thus could only sit there fidgeting his fingers. Kale Nim. What? There was no need for him to turn around. Choi Han was the only person who called him Kale Nim. Should I report about what happened at Breck Kingdom? Rosalind suddenly looked toward Choi Han in shock. However, Choi Han did not look at her and only looked toward Kale. However, Kale, who was looking at Locke, shook his head. No need. I don't think I need to know what you did for a friend. Rosalind could see Choi Han smiling peacefully after hearing Kale's words. He then started to speak. Yes, that is true, but please let me know if there is anything you are curious about. I will report it to you right away. No need. Kale felt like he would just get a headache if he knew about it. He did not want to know how they were able to cause such a ruckus in the Breck Kingdom in such a short amount of time, as well as how Rosalind gave up her claim to the throne. Locke. He called out to Locke instead. Yes. Locke, who was now taller than Choi Han, was still a bit awkward. Kale knew why Locke was so fidgety right now. Hans had said that Choi Han's group had arrived an hour ago. While Choi Han and Rosalind probably had a lot to do once they got here, it was obvious what Locke was thinking about in this foreign place. Kale looked toward Locke's confused face and started to speak. Your siblings are somewhere else right now. Locke's expression changed. Where? Are they all there? Kale answered without any hesitation. Harris Village. Choi Han, who had been looking at Kale, stiffened after hearing those words. However, Kale did not even look his way before taking a break to take a sip of warm tea. Someone else interjected as he did that. It was Deputy Butler Hans. We are currently reconstructing Harris Village. It used to be a small but beautiful village next to the mountain. Something bad happened not too long ago, causing it to burn down. Mountain, small but beautiful village, and reconstruction due to a large fire. A single image filled Locke's mind as he heard those words. It was an image of his hometown that was burned to the ground. We are also constructing a proper cemetery as well. Choi Han looked toward Hans as Hans peeked toward Kale and continued to speak. The young master was adamant about that part. Click. The teacup made a noise as Kale put it back down on the table. He then started to frown and retort back. I was not adamant about it. But wasn't this the first thing you ever asked the Count Nim for in regards to something related to our Hennetis territory? This was the first time I ever saw you interested in the administration of our territory, young Master Nim. It was nothing big. Kale waved toward Hans to say nothing else and Hans quickly shut up. However, he seemed to be fidgety like he still had a lot to say. Kale just ignored this and looked toward Locke, who seemed to be deep in thought. Locke. Yes. Go see your siblings and the land that they are living on right now. Kale then turned around. Locke was staring at him, but he knew Locke would understand since he was a sharp kid. He then called out to the still stiff Choi Han. Choi Han. Choi Han was quietly observing Kale as usual. A lot of things had happened in the Breck Kingdom. He had taken care of all of it quickly in order to return home. He could hear Kale's voice echo in his ear. Go give your regards as well. Your younger brother Locke doesn't know the way, so you can guide him there. Regards. He didn't need to ask who that should be directed to. Choi Han lightly clenched his fists before opening them back up. He had to calm the overflowing emotions inside of him. Harris Village, that had burnt down to a crisp. That village would now be different. Kale said one final thing to the three of them. You can go now. Miss Rosalind, it is fine for you to leave now. Kale was tired after dealing with these three for the first time in a while. It felt like his honey-like break for the last 3 weeks had just disappeared into thin air. Locke and Rosalind slowly followed Hans out of Kale's study. Choi Han waited until they all had left before finally getting up. Kale Nim. He then bowed. Thank you very much. Choi Han chuckled after raising his head back up because he could see Kale had a stoic expression that also seemed to show that he was annoyed. I don't need such thanks. Just get out. Choi Han did as he was told and headed for the door. Kale, who had picked his teacup back up while observing Choi Han, could hear Choi Han stop with the doorknob in his hand and start to speak. I heard from Mr. Hans that you will be heading to the Whipper Kingdom. Yes. Kale just gave a curt response. We will be going right away once you get back from the village, so pack your bags. Yes, sir. Choi Han had a refreshing smile on his face. However, that smile quickly disappeared as he turned the doorknob. Click. Choi Han continued to speak as the door opened. His name was Bob. How do you know about Bob? It had been a while since he heard of Tunka's alias, Bob. Did Hans tell him about Tunka? Kale looked toward Choi Han with curiosity, but he could only see Choi Han's back as he stood at the door. Choi Han's unique calm and sincere voice continued to flow. Mr. Beacrox told me that he almost made you get hurt. Why would Beacrox say something like that? Kale recalled the incident and responded back. Hurt? I didn't get hurt. I just got poured on by water and boulder dust. I understand. Choi Han did not say anything else as he walked out of the study. Kale could see Hans crossing paths with Choi Han and coming back in. Hans stopped for a moment after making eye contact with Choi Han and blankly stood there. What is it? Nothing. Nothing at all. Hans waved his hands frantically at Kale's question and looked back toward the leaving Choi Han before coming into the study. Young Master Nim. What? Kale observed Hans's completely pale expression. Did you have a fight with Choi Han Nim? Me. What the hell are you talking about? Of course you didn't. Haha, it is nothing. Kale stared at the weirdly acting Hans, but still said what he needed to say. He still had to give the order. We will leave in about 10 days, so prepare everything. Yes, I understand. I will work hard. Kale continued to blankly stare at the suddenly energetic Hans, but Hans quickly left the study. Kale, who was now left alone in the study, looked toward the calendar. The last guardian of the magic tower, who cast away his position and ran away. This will be my first time seeing a dwarf. In order to buy a fully intact magic tower, he needed to meet the dwarf whose family had protected the magic tower for generations. Kale started to smile. That dwarf was not just any dwarf. A mixed-blood dwarf that is half rat beast person. Muller. The tiny person that had the shabbiest and worst death in The Birth of a Hero. He was as short as a dwarf and looked weak without any muscles due to the unique nature of the rat people. He really was a tiny person. CAE headed out of the study and into the bedroom. He was thinking about how to catch that runaway rat while he was heading toward the Black Dragon, An, and Hong, who were probably playing in the bedroom right now. 10 days. This will pass by very quickly. And just as Kale expected, a week quickly went by. He was sitting in his couch like he had been a week ago, leaning deep into the back of the couch. Sigh. Kale did not hide his sigh as he sat there with a frown. Choi Han and Locke, who had left exactly a week ago, leaving Rosalind here, were back. However, they did not come back alone. Young Master Nim. Vice Captain Hillsman came back with them. But his appearance was weird. The vice captain, who usually dressed in a way that fit his position, was wearing shabby leather armor and had lots of injuries on his face. I told him to focus on the restoration of Harris Village. It felt like the vice captain had done some things in addition to what Kale had ordered. I have returned, young master. He didn't know the reason, but Kale still avoided Hillsman, who was speaking with admiration. However, he was not the only one who came back with Choi Han and Locke. Young Master Nim. We wanted to see you. Young Master Kale Nim. We're here too. Hello young Master Kale. Have you been well? Kale could hear 10 children speaking at once. Maze, as well as the other wolf children, were innocently looking at Kale and smiling. However, the atmosphere around them felt very different. The children had bandages wrapped around multiple spots on their bodies. Something outside of Kale's expectations seemed to have happened in Harris Village. We came with Lok Hyung because you never mentioned when we should come back. Maze answered for all of them. Kale held back his sigh. Not telling you when to come was my way of saying don't come back. Kale could not tell the children who were already here to head back, so he just nodded his head and turned around to look at Choi Han and Lok. He gave an order to the two of them. Pack your bags. We will leave in 2 days. However, a response came from somewhere else. Yes, sir. A total of 11 people. The vice captain and the wolf children all energetically responded. It was like Kale was looking at a knight's brigade that had been training for a long time. Choi Han and Lok looked toward them with satisfaction. This was especially true for Choi Han, who was looking at them like he was looking at his students. Kale's expression became odd. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Chapter 67, wasn't supposed to be like this, 4. That odd sensation continued until Kale arrived at the dinner table. All he said was one sentence. I will be visiting the Whipper Kingdom for a bit. Clang. The spoon in the hand of his youngest sister, the 7-year-old Lily, fell to the ground. Kale turned to look at Lily after hearing the noise only to see Lily with a pale face and the corners of her lips shaking. My teacher said. Lily didn't even think about picking up the spoon as she continued to mumble. The Whipper Kingdom is very scary right now and people die every day. The nobles have to hide and it is even hard to eat yummy food. You can't even sleep in peace. That is what my teacher said. Her emotions seemed to be getting stronger as she continued to speak. She then started to frown after looking toward Kale. You are not allowed to do that. Count Deruth cut Lily off and sternly answered. Kale looked toward Deruth with confusion. The Crown Prince had promised assistance during his travel to the Whipper Kingdom so that he could safely and stealthily get there. We will tell your family that you are doing my bidding. There's no need to tell them about the mages or magic tower or anything of the sort, right? Of course. Secrets are the best. I also only want my family and the Abar Territory Liege to know of my travels. Naturally. I will have it all prepared. Crown Prince Elberu then immediately informed Count Deruth that it was a secret mission that he had tasked for Kale. Father, it is an order from His Highness, the Crown Prince. It doesn't matter. The good-natured and average-looking Count Deruth's face was extremely scrunched up in a frown. Kale looked around to Basin, who was stiff like time had frozen, and then to the only person who looked calm, Violin. She casually asked once they made eye contact. Is this your own decision? Yes. I wish to go. Kale. Yes. Violin put her spoon down and continued to speak. You know it is dangerous over there. Yes. Kale lightly agreed. However, it would be fine with Choi Han, the Black Dragon, Rosalind, and Locke. Even Hillsman and the 10 wolf children were passionately asking him to take them with him, so he didn't think he would be in danger at all. Kale, just remember one thing. I am always worried about you, my son. We all worry about you. However. Violin's gaze suddenly turned sharp. We don't care about this kingdom at all. Ahem, wife, we need the kingdom to be safe for our family to be safe as well. Deruth stopped frowning and let out a fake cough. However, Violin ignored it and continued to ask Kale. Is this your decision? Violin asked the same question once more and Kale immediately responded back. I am a golden turtle. Count Deruth recalled what he had said to his son not too long ago. We protect anything and everything with our very sturdy shell. However, the most important thing is to protect ourselves. He looked toward his son, who seemed calm and relaxed. It is most important for me to use my sturdy shell to protect myself. That was Kale's answer. I am a Henitus after all. Of course, Kale put his own safety first. He would only step into a battlefield if it looked like they would definitely win, and he had the strongest person on the battlefield next to him. You don't need to worry. His voice was full of certainty and his gaze was confident. Countess Violin started to smile. All right, I understand. But I do not think I can stop worrying. That is what it means to be a parent. There really wasn't a reason to worry, but Kale nodded at Violin anyways. Count Deruth kept his mouth shut as they restarted their meal. Based on how he was not telling Kale that he could not go, it seemed like he had accepted it as well. They think we'll do anything they order us to do because we have been staying low for a while. Count de Ruth just mumbled to himself as he roughly chewed on a piece of a meat every so often. However, seeing as how there was no more opposition, Kale peacefully focused on his meal again. He was focusing on his meal intensely, such that he did not notice what happened next. He didn't see that the gaze shared between Count de Ruth and Countess Violin was not normal. He also didn't know that after dinner, Count de Ruth ordered the butler to secretly gather any and all information related to the Crown Prince and the Whipper Kingdom, regardless of the cost. Kale just finished the great meal and left the dining room. He could hear someone rushing toward him, although this was against the noble's etiquette. Basin. It was Basin and Lily who chased after Kale. "Hyung Nim, must you go?" "Pretty much." He didn't need to go, but he just preferred 10 years of peaceful days rather than just one day. Kale continued to speak to his two quiet siblings. "Both of you need to focus on your studies and training. I can only go around like this because the two of you are here holding things down." Kale was always at peace knowing Basin would become the next liege of the territory and Lily the commanding officer for the military. At least they wouldn't have the typical drama plotlines of the eldest son and the more talented younger son fighting for the successor position nor something of the sort. Kale turned away from the siblings who were still just quietly watching him. He still had a lot to prepare. Kale started to walk away as he spoke to his siblings again. "I will bring you both some souvenirs from the Whipper Kingdom." Kale could not see that Basin and Lily's gazes were focused on Kale before exchanging glances with each other and nodding their heads. He had absolutely no idea that his younger siblings had already decided their future occupations. A few days later, Kale was happy that he was able to get on the ship at exactly the time he planned to do so. "Young Master Kale." Kale looked toward the source of the voice as soon as he got on the ship. "Young Lady Amiru." Amiru quietly observed Kale, who was still just as relaxed as before. The Abar liege had already gotten on the same boat as the Crown Prince, so Amiru had ordered for them to prepare the largest and strongest ship as soon as she received the Crown Prince's order. 1. "Young Master Kale, I hope that you return safely without hurting yourself this time. I hope for the same as well." He had absolutely no plans to get hurt. Kale could see that Amiru started to frown like she didn't believe him. "I do not understand why His Highness would send you to that dangerous place when you just finished your recovery. However, His Highness is probably sending you because it is you, and he can trust you." Trust. The Crown Prince was not the type to trust anyone. Kale had no problem honestly saying that with a stiff expression. "Really? I'm not so sure. He didn't seem to trust me much at all." Amiru raised her voice at Kale's bitter smile. "Of course. Young Master Kale, if it means anything, I trust you." "Ah, yes, well, thank you very much, young Lady Amiru." Seeing Amiru respond so fiercely, which was opposite her calm demeanor, Kale could not say anything else. He then started to walk again as they needed to leave on time. He had people he needed to meet. Young Master Ca-. "I'll be on my way now, young Lady Amiru." Amiru had some other things to say, but just closed her mouth. The image of Kale pushing back his red hair that was moving along with the ocean breeze was both refreshing and cool. Kale got on the ship with a relaxed heart after seeing that Amiru was no longer trying to hold him back. He got on the deck and could see that the village was very noisy with construction right now. Furthermore, some of the other whirlpools had disappeared, creating a safe path that was wide enough for a large ship. But the rest of the whirlpools are still the same. Kale turned his gaze back to the ship and started to sigh. Sigh. How did he end up with so many people? Choi Han, Locke, and Rosalind. The kittens, An and Hong, were shaking because they were on water yet were adamant that they would come with him. Hans, who was next to the kittens. Finally, Vice Captain Hillsman, who was completely pale because he was on a ship, Beecrox, who was observing Hillsman silently, and the 10 wolf children next to him. If I get hurt with all of these freaks around me, that would be very surprising. Someone might even think he was trying to go destroy a kingdom right now. I like the smell of the ocean. Why would he fear anything, especially with the black dragon coming along as well? Kale gave an order to the group, who were all looking at him. Let's go. Boo. The horn sounded their departure across the Abar Sea. The ship was disguised as a trade ship. Well, that wasn't really a disguise. It is a trade I am making after all. But it will naturally not be a fair trade. It would be very beneficial for Kale, but unfair for the other party. Human, do not smile like that. You look like you are going to skim someone again. He could hear the black dragon's voice, but chose to ignore it and enjoy the refreshing ocean breeze. Just like that, the ship started to head for the Whipper Kingdom's smallest port. Later that night, Kale was not sleeping but standing on the deck. It was close to midnight, so nobody else was on the deck, but the deck was lit up and the full moon made it not dark at all. He was planning to meet some guests here tonight. Kale leaned on one of the railings as he calmly looked out to the ocean. It was at that moment. Human. The black dragon revealed himself and approached Kale. There was no need to be invisible because nobody else was here right now. What? I was just wondering. The black dragon seemed to have a lot on his mind. No, he seemed very suspicious as he blankly looked Kale up and down. Is the name you are thinking of a random word? What the hell are you talking about? The black dragon seemed very concerned. I feel like you will pick something like black or dragon. Ah, your name. The black dragon was talking about his name. Kale made a very serious expression at the 4-year-old's very concerned question. Is a name like that not very good? Kale's expression was very serious. The black dragon had not seen Kale look so serious for a while now. The black dragon's eyes started to shake as he urgently responded. Not at all. I am fine with anything. It is fine as long as you give me a name, human. Do not worry. His wings were fluttering rapidly, and his tail was shaking as he strongly appealed to Kale. Kale's expression instantly turned normal like he was never serious at all. Then I am glad. He then casually continued on. Rayon, On and Han would have been sad if they heard what you said. Silence suddenly filled the area. Human, what did you just say? Kale had actually thought a lot about the black dragon's name, contrary to the black dragon's expectation. A name was a special thing given to someone. For Kim Rok-Soo, who had to live on his own, the only thing that was given to him by his parents was his name. Your first name is Rayon. Rayon. It meant joyful in pure Korean. 2. And your last name is Miru. Miru. Pure Korean for dragon. Joyful dragon. It was a funny name, but Kale had come up with it with full sincerity. He was worried that Choi Han might be suspicious of a pure Korean name, but he had come up with an excuse for that as well. A calm voice reached the black dragon's ears. However, the black dragon had never seen such an expression on Kale's face before. A calm smile was on Kale's face right now. I came up with this name in the hopes that you will be happy and live a joyful life. What does it mean? The black dragon asked Kale for the meaning of the name. Kale pointed to the black dragon with his index finger. You. Rayon and Miru. Neither of these words existed in this world. There was only one thing these two words stood for in this world. It is you. They are words just for you and only you. Only me. Yes. Kale started to smile as he patted the dragon's head. Since you are a great and mighty dragon. ONL. The black dragon mumbled to himself for a while before patting away Kale's hand from his head and stretched out his wings. His wings were fluttering rapidly as he snorted. I guess it is useful. I will do you a special service and use this name. Sure, Rayon. The dragon started to scrunch his nose. The corners of his lips were twitching as he flew up into the air. I am the great and mighty Rayon Miru. Yes, Rayon. Right. I am Rayon. The black dragon had received a first name and a last name after 4 years of life. He now had something other than his body that belonged to just him. The dragon raised his head. He could see the darkness of the night sky that was different from the darkness inside the cave. It was a night like this when he had been rescued from the cave. The black dragon, Rayon, would never forget that moment. He also felt like he would never forget this moment either. Kale raised his head like the black dragon. The night sky was the same no matter where he went. He could hear Rayon's voice as he blankly continued to stare at the sky. Thank you, Kale. What? Kale looked toward Rayon with surprise. However, the black dragon was already back to normal. Human, how is it that you cannot understand the first time? Why don't you say it once more? Kale started to smile as he tried to pat Rayon's head. Rayon headbutted the palm and strongly objected. No. I really, truly, absolutely will not. Weak human, go inside and sleep. You will catch a cold. However, contrary to his actions, Rayon's wings were fluttering and his tail was wagging like On and Hong. Kale quietly laughed at Rayon's appearance. The quietly laughing Kale was very visible, even though it was nighttime and they were out in the ocean. I think it will be difficult to go back in. Why is it diff dash dot? Rayon suddenly stopped talking before looking out into the ocean. He was looking at a spot far from the ship. Splayawawash. The water parted as a large existence slowly showed itself. It was a whale. It was at that moment. Kale Nim. Someone urgently shot out from inside the ship and was rushing toward Kale at a very fast pace. It was Choi Han. Choi Han had a worried expression as he inspected the existence that was slowly revealing themselves. He then turned to look at Kale and approached him. It was then that Choi Han could see it. Kale was waving at him to go away with a very annoyed expression. The dragon Rayon then scoffed at Choi Han and started to speak. They are not enemies. What? Choi Han turned to look back at the ocean. At the same time, Kale stopped leaning on the railing and bowed his head toward the ocean. It was not just one whale. There were 3 whales coming to them. The guests had arrived. One was Witaira, the humpback whale. The other was a killer whale. And finally, I greet the whale king. Kale greeted the largest of the 3, a humpback whale, the whale king. Chapter 68, wasn't supposed to be like this. 5. The large whale eyes of the whale king, Schickler, moved toward Kale. Kale was smiling. What a strong pressure. Schickler was the king of the ocean. He had a presence that could not be compared to the king of a kingdom that oversaw a small region of the western continent. That was why Kale was starting to smile even more. Schickler's pupils started to cloud as he began to smile. Kale stepped back a bit and opened up his arms. How about we have our discussion above the deck? PSSSSSSSSSSSSH. Water vapor filled the air as 3 individuals quietly approached the ship. Tap. 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 The 3 people gently landed on the deck. Kale could hear Rayon's voice in his head at that time. Dragons are much more beautiful and glorious. Kale understood Rayon's feelings and patted his head. These 3 pure-blooded whales were extremely beautiful. This one is completely stiff. Choi Han had stiffened up after seeing the whale tribe people. Kale followed Choi Han's gaze and looked at each of the 3 people in front of him. The future whale queen, Witaira. She was the same as usual. The killer whale with white hair. This man was probably Archie, the greatest warrior of the whale tribe. He had an important role in the whale tribe arc in the novel. He was the one who beat Lockup in the novel, and he was someone who was violent with a bad personality. However, his loyalty was quite strong. It has been a while since I've come down to the Southern Ocean. This old, yet cool voice made Choi Han turn his head. Schickler, the whale king, had a gentle smile on his face. He was the most handsome middle-aged man in the novel. The author seemed to have put his soul into this character, as the novel took 4 lines to describe Schickler's appearance. I can see why the author did that. But it wasn't like your appearance would feed you. Kale just needed to take in what he needed to take in. The south is much warmer, isn't it? Schickler's pupils started to cloud. He is just as Witaira described. His daughter, Witaira, had said that Kale was a weak yet strong person. As she mentioned, he was the weakest person on the deck but had no issue being confident. The south is good as well. Thank you for saving my son. I came with my daughter because I wanted to personally thank you. No need for such thanks. I just did what I needed to do. Kale smiled gently as he reached his hand out respectfully. What would be the point of having a long discussion so late at night? Since we are both busy people, shall we get right to the point? Sure. But you see. Schickler let out a small sigh. Kale did the same before reaching his hand out. Choi Han. Tap. Kale put his hand on Choi Han's shoulder. Schickler did a similar action. Archie. For some reason, Archie and Choi Han were staring at each other. What beef would two people who had met for the first time have with each other? Kale put some strength into the hand on Choi Han's shoulder and Choi Han looked toward him. Choi Han was mesmerized by the whale tribe's beauty a moment ago, so what would have made him so angry? This ship would sink with a single slash of his sword if Choi Han started to fight on the ship. What is it? Kale Nim. Choi Han bit down on his lips. At that moment, someone gave Kale the answer. As usual, it was the black dragon, Rayon. That whale checked you out from head to toe. How dare he? Kale could hear Rayon huffing as he turned away from Choi Han. Archie. Archie was even worse than Tunka. You know, the ones who are on the good side but always cause trouble. Archie was that type of character. He was someone who only pledged his allegiance to Schickler and did not even care about anybody else, including other members of the whale tribe. He was the troublemaker of the whales. Kale finally made eye contact with Archie. Kale held back his groan. Archie really was looking at him with vicious eyes. Why was this punk acting like this? However, the answer was pretty obvious. Probably because I made Schickler personally come to meet me. Archie didn't care about the fact that Kale had saved Schickler's son nor the fact that he helped out the whales with the mermaids. Kale stiffened up a bit after looking into the vicious eyes of someone who was even stronger than Wittyra. Schickler could see Kale stiffen up and urgently started to glare at Archie. He had told Archie not to do this multiple times, but Archie never seemed to listen. Archie, Inu .. Schickler stopped talking and turned his head. Father, young Master Kale is very odd. It was only for a moment, but he felt really big. He recalled what Wittyra had said as he looked at Kale. He could see that Kale was once again standing leisurely, as if he had never stiffened up in the first place. However, the atmosphere around Kale was different. He finally understood why his daughter had said that Kale was strong. A gaze that seemed so deep that they could not fathom the deepness was aimed toward Archie. Choi Han, who had been watching from the side, subconsciously stopped frowning. Kale Nim. He then subconsciously called out to Kale as well, but Kale did not look at him. Choi Han oddly felt like that was only natural. Kale's gaze was dominating and only looked forward. The atmosphere around Kale also captured everyone's attention. It was different from a strong pressure. It was gentle yet firm, making it difficult to approach. It was because Kale was frowning. My body is responding on its own. The vitality of the heart responded to the pressure from Archie, making a bit of the dominating aura come out as well. The two powers working together made it possible for him to escape the strong pressure from Archie. Kale slowly started to speak. Who are you? Since it was like this anyway, he might as well squash him right now. Kale did not like Archie's gaze and slowly moved forward. Creak. Creak. The wooden planks on the deck creaked with his every step. Just who do you think you are? The dominating aura revealed about half of its strength. Exactly half a step. Kale stopped in front of Archie and asked in a blunt manner. That you dare to stare at me like this? Archie could not speak. He was definitely a bit taller than Kale, but it felt like Kale was looking down at him. Kale had definitely looked weak and he still felt like he would be able to kill Kale with a single hand, but he could not move. Archie could see the corner of Kale's lips starting to gently go up. Kale could also see that Archie's gaze had softened up, and so he coldly answered. If you can't even answer that question. Archie could tell that the man in front of him, Kale, was looking down at him. Then don't get caught staring like that. Kale and Archie stared at each other in silence for a few seconds until Archie's foot took a step backward. At that moment, Kale put away the dominating aura and started to smile as he looked toward Schickler. Isn't that right, Your Majesty? Kale did not want to fight with them since they would see each other a few more times in the future and they still needed to make some deals with each other. That was why he had only used half of the dominating aura and was now looking toward Schickler with the brightest smile he could muster. Indeed. Schickler answered after a few moments and grabbed onto Archie's shoulder with a very strong grip. Apologize and introduce yourself. Kale knew how Schickler had domesticated the troublemaker Archie. He beat him up. He beat up him so much that the entire ocean seemed to be filled with dust. He really beat him to a pulp while saying that a beating was the best medicine for a troublemaker. 1. Archie then came back to his senses and became Schickler's loyal subordinate. That was why Cale knew that Archie would not hurt him even though he was glaring at him. Cale could see Archie bowing his head without looking at him. "I apologize." It was a very quiet voice. He really didn't want to apologize. At least, that was what Cale thought as he glared at Archie. Archie quickly avoided his gaze when their eyes met. "My name is Archie." "All right. I am Cale Henitus." He then heard Rayon's voice in his head. "Human, you seemed almost as strong as the tip of my toenail just now. Good job. Very good job." Cale held back his sigh at this charisma that was complimented by a 4-year-old before gently reaching his hand out to Schickler, who was blankly staring at him. "Please give me the package." "Ah, right." The oddly frazzled Schickler seemed to have lost the regalness of a king and turned into a neighborhood uncle. That was how he was once you became close to him. Schickler looked toward Watyra. "Young Master Cale. Long time no see. The package." Watyra was relieved that Cale was still the same. "Relieved? Me?" She was shocked for a moment, but calmed herself before handing the package over. There were a total of 3 items that were now in Cale's hands. One of them was a small bottle with only the dragon's dead mana contained inside, with the poison having been removed. Dead mana. This was very dangerous for a living person who did not have the darkness affinity. That was why Schickler was curious. "But why do you need this dead mana? There should be no humans who need it." "Well, maybe the necromancers of old may find it useful, but there are none of them left. I don't know what you plan to do with this small amount." Cale put on a mischievous smile. Who knows? What Cale needed was just this small amount. Cale put all the items into his magic bag and discussed a couple things with the whale royalty before saying goodbye. "See you again next time. I apologize once again for Archie's actions today." "It's okay." "No, I insist. It's because that punk still has a lot to learn." "Father." Watyra called out to calm her father before speaking to Cale. "See you again next time, young Master Cale." "Sure thing." He needed to see them multiple times since there were many ways he could still put them to use. Cale leisurely waved at the leaving Watyra and Schickler, as well as the fidgeting Archie who said his goodbyes, before turning back toward his crew. "Choi Han, what are you doing?" "Ah, nothing." Choi Han was shocked when Cale called out to him and vigorously shook his head. Cale walked past Choi Han, who had been standing there with a blank expression on his face for a while, and headed into the ship. "I'm going to go sleep." The black dragon Rayon, who was following behind Cale, abruptly turned his head around and started to speak to Choi Han. "I am Rayon Miru, the handsome, beautiful, great and mighty existence. Remember that." Choi Han stared at the extremely excited dragon before observing Cale, who was his usual relaxed self. "I need to get stronger as well." Choi Han's voice disappeared into the ocean as he stood on the deck alone. Of course, if Cale had heard this, he would gasp in fear, thinking that an even stronger Choi Han would easily destroy this entire continent. The next morning, Cale could see that Han was grumbling next to the black dragon, who will now be called Rayon. "I like Rayon, it is cool. But I think our Ahong would be nice too." On the other hand, the usually quiet On seemed to be excited, as she was happily walking circles around Rayon. "Rayon Miru. Our youngest's name is so good. It is the best." Cale, who had been watching this while laying on his bed in the ship, turned away as Rayon continued to shout. "Hey, Wolfie. I am Rayon Miru. Hey, Mage. I am Rayon Miru. Choi Han. I know your name already." It was so much that even the usually nice Choi Han was answering like this. Currently, Rayon, the kittens, Choi Han, Locke, and Rosalind were in Cale's room. Rayon approached Choi Han. "If you know it, say it." "Sure, Rayon." Rayon started to smile. It was then that Choi Han turned toward Cale. "Miru. How did you come up with that last name?" Choi Han had an odd expression on his face. Cale understood the reaction. Choi Han did not seem to know the pure Korean, rayon, but he seemed to know, miru. Something I made up. Made up. Yes. I suddenly thought of that word when I looked at rayon. It just popped into my head. It was a very interesting experience. Kale just casually answered as he continued to eat grapes while laying down. He then asked Choi Han as calmly as possible. Why do you ask? Nothing. It was just interesting. Choi Han's gaze was filled with nostalgia. It was because the name was pure Korean. He nodded his head and started to speak to Rayon. Rayon Miru. It is a cool name. Rayon pretended not to hear what Choi Han had said, although his wings were fluttering with joy. Kale nonchalantly observed this before looking out the window toward the ocean. He hoped to arrive at the Whipper Kingdom soon. They arrived at the smallest port in the Whipper Kingdom in a few days, as Kale had wished. There was someone there to greet them, the most important player for this transaction. Young Master Nim. The even chubbier Billows now further resembled a piggy bank. He jumped on board to greet Kale on the deck. Billows seemed to be much lighter than his actual weight, as he agilely jumped on board as soon as the ship stopped. Agu, young Master Nim, I hope you didn't get seasick. Seems like he is trying to suck up to you. But Kale actually really liked how Billows was acting. Kale patted Billows's shoulder and whispered in his ear. Time to catch a big fish. Billows started to smile so widely that his eyes almost disappeared. I will just trust you, young Master Nim. The magic tower will be destroyed and the liege of the magic tower will be ripped to shreds by Tunka. All of the mages inside the magic tower will be killed, however, the liege of the magic tower was a greedy person. Kale looked toward the messed up port that was very different from the ports of the Roan Kingdom and casually said aloud. Treasure hunts are so fun. As long as you find the treasure, that is. Chapter 69, Different Than Intended, 1. Kale patted Billows's shoulder. Billows's eyes filled with anticipation as Kale started to speak. So work hard if you need some treasure. It was an indifferent command, but Billows still responded with excitement. As hard as you need me to work, hee. Kale shook his head after seeing that Billows was clearly excited. He knew that there was a lot going on Billows's mind, but that Billows was putting up this front. Since I didn't explain it thoroughly. All he had told Billows was 2 words. Magic device. Billows had heard only those 2 words. Kale observed Billows leaving to work before turning to look at a certain person. He was looking at the person who needed to be the most cautious in the Whipper Kingdom. Rosalind. The mage needed to be careful if she did not want to get hurt or even killed. Kale found her standing on the deck and approached her. It was so that he could warn her. Miss Rosalind. But there was no need to do that. Kale stopped to think about what to say. What is it, young Master Kale? Kale had to ask after hearing the calm in her voice. Is that a club in your hand? The club in Rosalind's hand was causing strong gusts of wind as she swung it around. She looked like she was used to this. He could also see a light leather armor underneath her robe as she refreshingly answered Kale's question. It is indeed a club. Whether it is a magic staff or a club, they're all the same when you use it to hit something. You are very wise. Kale was honestly in admiration as he gave her a thumbs up. There was no need for him to warn her about moving around the Whipper Kingdom as a mage. Wise. I just wanted to make sure things didn't become difficult for everyone else because of me. I may not look like it, but I learned a variety of basic martial arts when I was young. Tap. Tap. Rosalind lightly tapped her other palm with the club. As part of the royal family, especially as the eldest child in line for the throne, she had learned self-defense, as well as some other basic martial arts. Her gaze suddenly became chilly. I also wanted to take a look at this place with my own eyes. Kale started to smile. Rosalind, the liege in charge of the new magic tower in the future, was a very just person like Choi Han. That was why she was able to grow together with her party members. However, she also had a definite goal as well as a cold rationality. The Whipper Kingdom would give her some complicated feelings, as well as an opportunity to learn. Kale followed Rosalind's gaze to look toward the port. This was the least destroyed port in the Whipper Kingdom because it was the smallest one and because the regular citizens used it quite frequently. However, there were not many ships going in and out of the port, and the faces of the people getting off of the few ships arriving were very gloomy. However, the faces of the people living here were bright. Many of the citizens who were treated like slaves at the magic tower live here. Kale could see pillars of black smoke in the distance. Civil wars always left behind destruction in their paths. Young Master Nim, we can move now. The carriage is prepared. Great. Kale nodded at Billows's statement and got off the ship. He started to speak after taking his first step into the Whipper Kingdom. It doesn't smell that good. Kale sniffed the musky smell of the burnt and destroyed buildings as he headed to the residence Billows had prepared for him. He started to speak to Billows once he got to his room. You prepared quite well. Kale complimented Billows, who had prepared the quietest residence by the port, a carriage with the Flynn Merchant Guild crest, as well as all of the other tiny details. Billows shrugged his shoulders as Kale asked one more thing. Did you make sure to do it quietly without others knowing about it? Isn't that only natural? Kale smiled and responded back after seeing the greedy gaze in Billows's eyes. I knew I liked you. You as well, young Master Nim. Kale leaned on the couch as he casually asked. Victory. Billows slowly nodded his head with a sincere expression. Yes. It was as you explained, young Master Nim. I see. In the end, no, as expected, the non-mage faction had been victorious. Kale had arrived right on time for the end of the Civil War. There was only one thing that signaled the end of the Civil War. The destroyed magic tower. The fall of the mage's final fortress signaled the end of the Civil War. Of course, there were still things to take care of afterward the war. That non-mage faction was wilder than I had expected. Billows started to frown as he described the Civil War. They seem like they are not afraid of death and like they are only focused on killing mages. Billows's shoulders shook a bit as he tried to recall how it looked before the Civil War compared to the current situation. These two periods of time were the best time for him to make some money. However, he had seen much more than that. They were especially scary whenever the citizens with magic resistance showed up in large numbers or took the vanguard. The biggest influence in the battle between the mage faction and the non-mage faction was this, magic resistance. These citizens with magic resistance were slowly born through the generations, and the fact that there were only a few of them, as well as the fact that they could not learn any magic, made their lives difficult in the Whipper Kingdom. However, these citizens with magic resistance were born in large numbers during this generation, which ended up becoming an advantage for the non-mage faction. The citizens considered this as a sign from nature that they were to kill those arrogant mages who believed they could rule over nature with their mana. This is especially true for the person named Tunka, the one in charge of the non-mage faction. Kale was just silently listening. That man and his direct subordinates really seemed to move based on instinct. I saw him just once from a distance and he was pulling a mage's neck off with his bare hands. You don't know how terrifying that was to witness. Sigh. Billows let out a sigh as he shook his head. I couldn't even sleep properly that night. Just thinking about Tunka and his direct subordinates still makes me feel sick. Billows had made up his mind to absolutely avoid those people. It didn't feel like he could communicate with them. Thankfully, the staff around Tunka were smart and easy to talk to. It must have been very cruel. Billows wildly nodded his head at Kale's short response. Yes, it was very cruel. The corpses of those mages who were torn to shreds while they were still alive are hanging outside all of the castles. However, Billows did not say that that was bad. Well, I'm sure even that is not enough in the Whipper citizens' perspectives. Billows understood how they were feeling. Furthermore, as someone who was making money off of the Civil War, he was not in the position to say either side was good or bad. But, young Master Nim. What is it? Billows started to smile as he asked Kale a question. Kale's response felt cold, but Billows did not budge. Where are we headed to now? Billows was very curious about their destination, as well as what the treasure was. He could see Kale, who had been quietly listening to everything he had to say, start to smile. This smile filled Billows with anticipation. Kale then started to speak. To meet Tunka. Excuse me. Who? Billows thought that he had heard wrong. The fact that he had not been able to sleep properly for a while may have affected his hearing. Kale continued to speak while looking at the confused expression that he had seen for the first time appear on Billows's face. We are going to the magic tower. What? There were many reasons Kale had selected this very small port. It was the closest port to the magic tower, one out of the battle areas, and one where many of the citizens still lived. Kale leisurely continued to speak to Billows, who had a blank expression on his face but seemed to be thinking about a lot of things right now. Just trust me. Billows opened and closed his mouth a few times before jumping up and heading over to the cabinet in order to take out a bottle of alcohol. He then started to chug it and only stopped after emptying about half of the bottle into his mouth. I will trust my instincts. And what do your instincts say? Billows took out a new bottle and handed it to Kale. My instincts are telling me to follow you, young Master Nim. Kale took a gulp straight from the bottle. You have pretty good instincts. It is perfect for a merchant. Kale seemed to be very relaxed. Billows clenched onto the bottle in his hand as he looked past Kale's shoulders and out the window. Although the official civil war was over, there were still screams throughout the Whipper Kingdom as all of the mages were not caught just yet. Madness, despair, sorrow, these were all still plentiful in the air. This tastes great. Billows decided to follow his instincts even more after seeing Kale so calm. A few days later, Kale stepped out of the carriage with the Flynn Merchant Guild crest. There were 3 more carriages behind him as well. Young Master Nim, this is as close as we can get to the magic tower in a carriage. Kale could see the destroyed magic tower in the distance, but it was much less destroyed than he had expected. He really kept his promise about not destroying it much. Tunka had listened to what Kale had said. It is a beautiful magic tower. Billows seemed to be in a daze next to Kale. At that moment, Kale took someone out of his pocket and showed a small corner of it to Billows. Gasp. Billows let out a gasp. The golden plaque. He only saw a bit, but that was definitely a golden plaque. Billows's gaze instantly changed. Young Master Nim, I respect you very much. Kale just ignored Billows as Hans approached him. Young Master Nim, what do you plan to do now? Hans asked what Kale was going to do as he looked around. They were currently around the entrance of a base that was created in front of the magic tower. They could see lots of huts and houses. In fact, it seemed more like a village than a base based on the size. They could also see uniquely colored people as well. They were the citizens of the Whipper Kingdom. There were also other odd people as well. This made Hans's eyes start to quiver. MMPH. He then subconsciously covered his mouth with his hand. There were people who looked like warriors, but they were covered in blood and chopping up some corpses. They could tell that the corpses were wearing robes. These were all corpses of mages. Behind the corpses were the chopped-off heads of the mages rolling on the ground. The scent of blood and rotting flesh overwhelmed Hans's nose as he started to hear the sound of corpses burning behind him. Take a break if it's too much. Hans turned to look at the calm Kale and realized that everybody else around him was composed. Even Maze and the children, whom he recently learned were wolves, were calmly observing the situation in front of them. Hans. Yes, young Master Nim. This is a battlefield. Hans could feel the weight of those words. At the same time, he clearly looked into Kale's eyes that were coolly observing the entire battlefield. Chapter 70, Different Than Intended, 2. Kale indifferently observed the tents, warriors, merchants, and other people moving to and from the camp. It made him recall when he was Kim Rock-soo and working different jobs. He suddenly felt tired and had a desire to relax and read a book. However, his face was calm, as usual. Kale's gaze once again turned toward Hans as he asked Hans a question. Will you rest? I am okay, young Master Nim. Deputy Butler Hans could see Kale speaking to him in his usual self. Then let's work. That made Hans feel better. Kale gathered everyone in front of him after verifying that Hans was calm. Since the Civil War was already over, Kale and crew were able to get to the base in front of the magic tower once they showed their identifications. The base was now just filled with people finally getting some rest after the long war. And the reason they were able to get so far was because Billows had traded materials with the warriors multiple times during the Civil War. They had come under the Flynn Merchant Guild's name. However, they were going to do something different starting now. We came to meet someone named Tunka today. Make sure you do not respond to any provocations before that. Choi Han, who had been quietly listening, started to speak. Who is this person named Tunka? Ah, that Bob guy from before is Tunka. Bob is an alias. Kale just casually responded to Choi Han as he turned to look at Billows. However, he was able to hear Choi Han's quiet mumbling as he turned. So it is him. Huh. It is nothing. Choi Han responded with a calm expression, so Kale just let it go as he started to speak to Billows. Billows, you said you could get to the tent with the chiefs. Yes. However, only about 6 people, including myself, can go. It seems like you made quite a bit of money. The fact that he was able to have conversations with the chief symbolized that Billows had made a lot of money through the Civil War. Billows just smiled and did not say anything else. At that moment, the invisible Rayon started to speak in Kale's mind. Funny. Now what? Kale started to frown. I have a feeling that something entertaining will happen. Feeling. Kale got the chills and caressed his neck as he ignored Rayon's words. He then quickly selected the 4 people who would go with him. Choi Han, Locke, Hillsman. Kale made eye contact with Rosalind. She had not said anything after looking around the residence once they arrived. Kale wondered whether she was angry about the death of her fellow mages. However, what Kale saw in Rosalind's eyes was the gaze of a royal princess. Rather than getting angry because of the deaths of the mages, she was thinking about the stupidity of the Whipper Kingdom's royal family for keeping things as is until the citizens rebelled like this. Miss Rosalind, you'll be coming, right? Rosalind fixed the large club over her leather armor as she answered. Yes. The people who would go with him had been decided. Kale decided to leave the rest to Hans. We will go somewhere quiet and stay there. I will keep everyone safe. Kale could see An and Hong snorting at Deputy Butler Hans's words. At the same time, they were asking Kale with their eyes. When will we go to the magic tower? Kale responded back with a gaze. Just wait a bit. They will soon be able to get to the location for the kittens to run wild. Let's go. Yes, sir. Billows put on a large necklace with the Flynn Merchant Guild crest on it and took the lead. Kale followed behind him. As soon as they entered into the base, they could feel multiple sharp gazes falling on them. Just look forward. Everyone looked forward like Kale said. The non-mage faction was made of citizens, knights, and the magic-resistant individuals. Kale's group stood out like a sore thumb amongst the faction members, who were all covered in blood. Kale could see the non-mage faction members in front of him as well. I guess they haven't had enough. They wanted war. He could feel the madness and chaos in the air around him. Kale recalled how Tunka had taken control of the Whipper Kingdom royalty and made them his puppets before rushing to fight with the Queen of the Jungle and the Empire. He took the time to look at the soldiers under the command of a tyrant like Tunka. They did not come up to provoke them or fight with them. They were just mesmerized by Tunka, who they instinctually feared. However, none of them backed away either. They just continued to viciously stare at Kale, who looked like a noble. We are here. Billows stood in front of a tent. It was not very deep in the base, as Kale had expected. It was only a bit away from the entrance. Honestly speaking, the chief's -- Billows. Kale cut Billows off because he knew what Billows was going to say. The non-mage faction thinks that they destroyed their rationality, but in reality, a different kind of rationality had exploded in its place. Are only mages smart? Are they the only educated ones? No. There were many others who were educated as well. The scientists had come under Tunka because they were tired of being suppressed by the mages. They hate magic even more than Tunka does. You could just consider them to be crazy. It is even scarier when smart people go crazy. Contact them. Yes, sir. Billows approached the largest tents in the chief's section. A warrior approached him to guide him and watch him. The chief's tent. There were many more warriors here than the other areas. It was interesting that Tunka had no problem throwing away weak warriors but were protecting these chiefs. That is why he couldn't become a real hero. Kale ignored the sharp gazes of the guards and waited for Billows to come back with the chiefs. He just needed to ask them to meet with Tunka and they would probably welcome it with open arms. However, why does my neck feel so cold? Kale looked around to see what might be causing this odd feeling. Billows was taking longer than he had expected. It should not take this long to come back with a single person. Human. Rayon's low voice rang in Kale's mind as the entrance flap to the tent billows started to move. It looked like a large person was trying to run out. No way. Suddenly, Choi Han, who had been standing behind Kale, stepped in front of Kale with a stiff expression. Choi Han. I have a bad feeling about this. What? Ryup. The tent entrance ripped open. I smell it. I smell the scent of a strong person. Mwahaha. This is perfect. I was so bored. A large man covered in blood revealed himself. Behind him was a man and a woman who were slightly smaller than him, but still quite large. Sigh. Kale let out a sigh. The crazy person who was covered in blood as if he had showered in mage blood was naturally Tunka. As usual, Tunka was accurately looking at a specific location. It's you. He was looking at Choi Han, who was protecting Kale from him. Tunka did not seem to even see Kale behind Choi Han. The other ones smell strong too, but you seem to be the strongest. I can't sleep while smelling such a scent. Kale decided he needed to step forward. However, Choi Han asked in a very low voice. Is he Tunka? Oh, you recognized him right away. Kale just answered Choi Han's question without thinking, and Tunka pointed to Choi Han at the same time. Fight me. Aren't your hands itching too? Kale let out a sigh. Tunka really never seemed to change. Choi Han would naturally decline as his personality was not one who would fight for no reason. He would definitely not fight with someone he had just met. Kale tried to walk past Choi Han, who was in front of him. That was when he heard Choi Han's voice. Sure. What? Rayon's voice echoed in Kale's head. Just as I expected. I, the great and mighty Rayon, is smart. Contrary to Rayon's excited voice, Kale started to frown. On the other hand, Tunka licked his lips after seeing the way Choi Han was glaring at him. He only had Choi Han in his eyes and did not see anybody else. Choi Han had the strongest scent here. It was the same scent that made him think of the whale people who were staring back at him in the Abar territory. Kakik, yes, I like that type of gaze. Tunka was excited. He felt like he could have a physical fight, one that did not rely on crap like magic. Choi Han put his hand on the hilt of his blade after seeing the madness in Tunka's eyes. He was calm, but his gaze seemed like it wanted to chop Tunka in half. Screech. A part of the blade came out of the scabbard. It was at that moment. Squeeze. Choi Han felt a strong grip on his shoulder and suddenly got the chills. He had felt this once before. It was the same pressure that caught everyone's attention when they were with the whales. A quiet yet emotionless voice reached Choi Han's ear. Choi Han. Kale was looking at him. Kale wasn't blaming him or giving him a command, but his gaze seemed to be extremely deep. That gaze made Choi Han subconsciously let go of the blade. Click. The blade was pushed back into the scabbard. Are you trying to fight right now? The dominating aura was surrounding Kale's entire body right now. He walked past Choi Han and faced Tunka. The stench of blood filled his nose. Tunka. Kale needed to stand above Tunka now. It became a little more complicated, but he decided that he might as well use this opportunity. Kale pushed back his red hair and greeted the blankly staring Tunka. Long time no see. You are dash. Tunka did not recognize him right away. However, as soon as he saw the red hair, he thought of a single person. However, this person in front of him was too different from the last time they had met. He clenched his fist. An unexplainable feeling was coming out of this bastard in front of him. The bastard that shoved him in the ocean and looked down on him, Kale Henitus. His gaze was the same as 2 months ago. The men he saw 2 months ago asked him a question. Do you want to fight? Kale had a calm smile as he asked. However, he did not wait for Tunka's response. Choi Han. Yes, sir. Choi Han could not help but nod his head at Kale's indifferent voice. Fight him if you want. Choi Han could only answer in one way. I will definitely win. Choi Han put his hand back on the hilt of his blade. His tightly clenched fist let him feel a stronger desire than before. Kale then turned toward Tunka, who was slowly starting to smile. Tunka then let out a loud laugh. Mwahahaha. It was so loud it echoed through the base. However, Tunka was still nervous. The person in front of him was definitely weak, however. There was an aura that dominated this area. Tunka ignored that aura and shouted even louder. He was excited. His body was heating up. Blood, he needed to see blood. Let's fight. Great. Very good. In that moment, Rayon was scoffing at Tunka as he spoke to Kale. He's crazy for a beating. What an idiot. Our side is much stronger. It was only obvious. Tunka would probably get beaten to a pulp. Choi Han was not the type to go easy in a fight. Kale looked toward the even crazier looking Tunka, who was laughing like a maniac, and started to speak to Choi Han. No need to hold back. That made Choi Han start to smile. This smile did not look pure and innocent at all. That smile satisfied Kale and he called over to Tunka. Bob. The sudden return of his alias from 2 months ago made Tunka stop laughing. Kale then glanced at Tunka's subordinates, as well as the warriors who were slowly approaching the chief's tents and the people who were too scared to move. He looked back at Tunka afterward and started to speak. Set it up. They might as well do it right if they were going to fight anyway.